Hello and welcome to my July and August reading wrap up. We are combining both of the months because I have not updated you guys over here on YouTube about the books that I've been reading, but you will recognize a couple of these if you follow me on Instagram, which is where I post more frequently. And it feels just right to wrap up the summer content because now that it's September, in my mind it's fall. I'm not going to talk your head off about all the fall content that I'm excited for over here on YouTube. But regardless, let's talk about the books that I read in July and August. This was like ages ago, but I read Diary of a Void by Emi Yagi. This was a very interesting book. It is about a woman who works in a corporate office in Japan, and she pretends to be pregnant in order to get out of things at work. So she doesn't want to have to work overtime. She doesn't want to have to serve people coffee or do miscellaneous tasks that aren't really part of her job description anyway. It's kind of silly, but it's also a commentary on the workforce in Japan and pregnancy, and it's kind of weird in the way that you almost start to think that the main character believes her own lie. It's really hard to rate this book, so I would give it like 3 stars from my personal opinion, but I think that it is definitely worth the read. It was very easy to get through, quick, fast pace. I feel like it has some important commentary on the workforce in Japan and women's lives and motherhood, but that wasn't really what I was expecting going into it, I'll say that. But if that's what you are looking for going into it, I think you might enjoy it even more than I did. I'm not gonna lie right now, I'm sweating because I just baked a bunch of pumpkin bread and my apartment is really warm because it's still summer technically, and I'm living in the fall mindset today, and so I'm sweating and I had to turn my AC off in order to film this video, but I wanted to wear this sweatshirt because I'm obsessed with it. I got it from Amazon. It'll be linked down below. Anything that you ever see me wearing or showing in the videos, I try to link them down below because I know sometimes people ask, or personally when I watch people's videos, I want to be able to access the things I see them talking about or wearing or whatever. Next up, if you follow me on Instagram, you already know, but I read God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This was my favorite book of the summer. This blew me away. I wasn't even really looking for mystery. I just read it because it was one of Book of the Month's July picks, and I loved the cover. I just think the cover is such a beautiful painting, and I loved the green and pink. I don't know, I'm really into green and pink. Look at my couch and my sweatshirt, if you couldn't tell. This is a mystery. It is set at a summer camp in the 1970s, and the family that owns the summer camp, their daughter goes missing, and it's connected with another mystery that happened years and years prior. It is so well written. It's so gripping. It felt so nostalgic. It was the perfect read. I would also recommend reading it in the fall. And if you want a well-written, nostalgic mystery that will just keep you guessing and wanting to turn the page, I highly recommend this. It is longer, but it flies by. And I was so shocked by the ending, and I did not see it coming. And I feel like it was really well done, the way that Liz Moore wrote this, because while I was reading it, I kept trying, obviously, to figure out who the killer was. I kind of had this system of being like, okay, this person is safe and they are not they're not the killer or part of the mystery in a bad way because of this thing. And wow, was I wrong. It was not who I expected at all. And I feel like sometimes you can kind of guess and you kind of get an inkling, or at the very least you suspect that person for a little bit and then you might move on to someone else. I never once suspected this person of anything, and I definitely did not suspect them of what they did and how everybody was intertwined. Ugh. Anyway, just go read this. 5 stars. Easy 5 stars for me. And then I read The Girl Who Drank the Moon, which is a young adult book. It's by Kelly Barnhill. This was actually recommended to me by my boyfriend's mom, who is a librarian, and she reads a lot of young adult and children's books for her library. But this is one of her favorite books, and she recommended it to me. And honestly, she told me to read this years ago, and it just took me for her to literally give me the physical book to read it. But I was blown away by this book. I typically don't read young adult fiction, let alone young adult fantasy, and this book is so precious. I actually cried, and it was so magical. It gave me the feeling of the fantasy books that I used to read when I was younger, but it's not too juvenile where it takes you out of the story at all reading it as an adult. Essentially, it's about a village that every year they sacrifice a baby. So they take a newborn baby and they set it into the woods, and it's their kind of offering to the evil witch. However, there's not really an evil witch who takes the baby. On her side of things, she goes out into the woods and is confused as to why the town just leaves a baby in the woods every year. And so she takes the babies and rehomes them until one year she picks up a little baby and for some reason is drawn to the baby and accidentally feeds it moonlight instead of starlight, the girl who drank the moon. And the baby becomes super powerful, and so she feels like she cannot, in her right mind, give this baby to a family knowing that the baby is going to have a ton of magic and be very powerful. So the witch takes the baby in, and there's just this beautiful family element, and it's just such a precious story, and I would honestly reread it. I highly recommend reading this and reading it in the fall. Read it now. Read it yesterday, honestly. 5 stars. So we're moving into August, and things changed for me in August because I got a Kindle. I got a Kindle Paperwhite. I didn't think that I would like it because I love reading physical books. I love reading on my Kindle. Again, if you follow me on Instagram, I've already babbled on about this, but this is addicting. I am not gonna lie. I read more books in the month of August because of my Kindle than I've read in a long time. I read 6 books, and I typically have been reading like 2 to 3 maybe. Reading on the Kindle, one, has allowed me to read faster, but it's also made me read more because it just feels more convenient, I guess. Maybe some aspect of it feels like it's like holding my phone, so it satisfies my need to pick up technology. Sometimes when I sit down to read, I just end up picking up my phone, and that's not good. It's kind of a bummer because I love holding the physical books to show you guys, but I'll put them on screen. You can be a Kindle girly and you can be a physical copy girly all the same. Like, the convenience of this for when I travel, I'm going to Japan in November, the convenience of this is going to be fantastic. But don't get me wrong, I adore having physical copies, and I will continue to purchase them. First up on my Kindle, I read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, and this book was actually recommended to me by someone on Instagram, and thank you to the person who recommended it. I cannot remember their handle for the life of me. I did love this book. It was set in a small coastal town in Washington State, which is where I live. I live in Seattle. So it was kind of cool to hear them talking about some of the places that I know. This is about a sentient octopus and a 7-year-old woman who works at the aquarium where the octopus lives. She's grieving the loss of her son. Her son died when he was 17 years old. All she knows is that he went out on a boat in the ocean and never came back. His body was never recovered, and there's kind of a mystery surrounding that. Years later, her husband also passed away, so she is widowed, but she's also part of a group called the Nitwits, which is a bunch of older women who get together every week, and they're just adorable. I love them. But she's working at the aquarium just for something to do, essentially. And it's just a heartwarming story of a sentient octopus, which this story was unlike anything I've ever read before. It was heartwarming. I enjoyed the mystery element. And overall, I would give it 4 stars. This is where it gets a little bit weird. I decided to try out some Kindle Unlimited, and I found this series because I typed in book series to read if you want to feel like you're watching Vampire Diaries. And suggested to me was The Marionettes by Katie Wismer. And this is probably the best 3-star book series I've ever read. The plot was really interesting. It's vampires, witches, it's set at a school, and enemies to lovers sort of vibe. Actually, I don't really know if they're enemies, but kind of romantasy. And there was a lot missing from this book. There was even a point where one of the main characters' names changed towards the end for no apparent reason. That confused me. But she was doing something right because I did move on and read the second book. And I had a good time the whole time reading these. I binged them, but I will not be continuing this series. However, I do think this author has really good potential. I loved her plot. I just feel like the characters needed to be a little bit more fleshed out, and there was some cheesy elements to the story and some things that just didn't add up, like the name change, as I said. But overall, I would definitely read this author in the future. And if you are looking for something that feels like watching Vampire Diaries or Pretty Little Liars, which I guess those shows, now looking back, do feel a little bit wild, and they're kind of just, if you know, you know, then I do think you would enjoy this. You could enjoy this. However, I finished the second book and I was like, I don't know if I can commit to another book to see how this all plays out. And I got less invested after I read the second book, but I still had a good time reading it. So the best 3-star series that I've read. Okay. And then I finally picked up The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. I've seen so many of you guys talking about it on social media. It is a very hyped up book, and for good reason, because I instantly gave it 5 stars. I read that, went to Goodreads instantly, crying. I was sobbing, and rated it 5 stars. I love the main character. I love the mystery in it. I love the family dynamics. I love all the women and how in their relationships, the Farrow women are iconic. Basically, it's about this girl, June Farrow, and her family. All the women in her family have a curse, essentially, where they go crazy as they get older, but they're not really going crazy. And there's a whole mystery surrounding it, and it's the love story, and it was so heartwarming. Love that book. I definitely want to read more books by this author because that was captivating, and it just made my heart warm, you know? And it made me cry. I finally picked up my first Stephen King. I read Fairy Tale. I'll be honest, I got about 60% of the way through and I DNF'd. However, I do think I'll pick it back up, and I did really like it. As soon as I started reading it, I literally was sitting on the couch and I looked at my boyfriend and I was like, you know, this might sound crazy, but Stephen King actually knows how to write a book. He's pretty good at it. However, his books are long, and that's normal, to be expected for Stephen King. And I did like this book. It just ended up going in a completely different direction than what I had thought. And so I might pick it back up again because I just kind of got fatigued reading it and needed to switch to something else. Plus my library loan expired. I was reading it on my Kindle, and that also contributed to my temporary DNF of it. I don't even know how to explain the plot of this book, but it kind of incorporates all of the fairy tales into one, but the way it starts, it feels very Stranger Things-esque, and then it totally veers into a different direction than what I had thought, and I guess that kind of threw me off, but I do really love Stephen King's writing, and I want to read more of his books, so if you have any Stephen King recommendations for me, leave them in the comments below. I don't really want to read horror, so anything other than his horror books, or ones that are at least less scary, because I want to try his horror, but like I'm trying to dip my toe in horror, which is another video I have coming up. But anyway, second to last book, we have One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I started reading this last year and then I DNF'd it. I just wasn't in the mood for it, and then I picked it back up and I just devoured it this year. I will say, some of you are going to hate me. I don't think I'm going to give it a 5-star rating like a lot of people have on the internet. People rave about this series. I do want to read the second book. I'm just going to take a break and read some other stuff before going into the second book. They're both on Kindle Unlimited if you guys are interested. The magic system is very interesting because it deals with cards, like kind of like playing cards, and each card gives you a different magical power. And the whole thing is they're trying to collect them all in order to get rid of this evil mist situation, and there's romantasy in it. There's kind of a mystery element. The main character has a monster living in her head, and you don't really know why or who this monster is. And the reason why I'm not gonna rate this 5 stars, I loved the atmosphere, I loved the mystery, I loved the romance, but the way that it ended, it didn't feel like, and I get that it's a duology, it just didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like we wrapped up enough, like we learned enough information. It didn't feel like a very strong payoff, I guess, for all the work of reading the book, if that makes sense. For that reason, I would probably give this like a 3.75 star rating. But I am intrigued by the second book because it seems like a lot of people like the second book even more. Last but not least, before I wrap up this video, I want to talk about the book that I'm currently reading, The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. First of all, I bought this solely based on the cover because it's gorgeous. Some of the reviews on the back. Reading this book was like sitting in the sun, watching bees in the foxgloves, a warm, peaceful delight of a novel. You can almost smell the jam and hear the ocean. I finished the book smiling. It's giving me 5-star feelings. I am 213 pages through. I plan on binging the rest of this night. I just want to say I think I'm going to be recommending this and shoving this down your guys' throats for the foreseeable future, unless something drastic changes in the second half of the book. This book literally has me sitting there smiling, and that never happens. I don't really have a lot of emotion on my face when I'm reading. I could be reading the most devastating thing, aside from when I cry. I could be reading something hilarious and I'll just be like, I could be reading the most insane thing and I'm just like stone-faced. This, I'm grinning. I'm giggling. The descriptions of the food in this, the descriptions of the magical creatures, this is something else. And she has another book coming out at some point. The cover hasn't even been revealed yet. And I want to get my hands on an ARC. I'm already plotting how I'm going to reach out to the publisher and beg for an ARC. I will give you my firstborn child. Please give me an ARC. That is my wrap up for July and September. I cannot wait to talk about fall books. My mind is in the fall foliage and we are ready to do fall things over here. Let me know what books you read this July and August, and if you would recommend any of them to me. Otherwise, I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye!